Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's 17 working days, so we're not looking likely at a general election to coincide with the local elections.
We'll find out for yourself.
I have just chaired a meeting of the Cabinet where we agreed that the government should call a general election to be held on the 8th of June. I want to explain the reasons for that decision, what will happen next, and the choice facing the British people when you come to vote in this election. Last summer, after the country voted to leave the European Union, Britain needed certainty, stability, and strong leadership. And since I became Prime Minister, the government has delivered precisely that. Despite predictions of immediate financial and economic danger, since the referendum, we have seen consumer confidence remain high, record numbers of jobs, and economic growth that has exceeded all expectations. We have also delivered on the mandate that we were handed by the referendum result. Britain is leaving the European Union, and there can be no turning back. And as we look to the future, the government has the right plan for negotiating our new relationship with Europe. We want a deep and special partnership between a strong and successful European Union and a United Kingdom that is free to chart its own way in the world. That means we will regain control of our own money, our own laws, and our own borders. And we will be free to strike trade deals with old friends and new partners all around the world. This is the right approach, and it is in the national interest. But the other political parties oppose it. At this moment of enormous national significance, there should be unity here in Westminster. But instead, there is division. The country is coming together, but Westminster is not. In recent weeks, Labour have threatened to vote against the final agreement we reach with the European Union. The Liberal Democrats have said they want to grind the business of government to a standstill. The Scottish National Party say they will vote against the legislation that formally repeals Britain's membership of the European Union. And unelected members of the House of Lords have vowed to fight us every step of the way. Our opponents believe, because the government's majority is so small, that our resolve will weaken and that they can force us to change course. They are wrong. They underestimate our determination to get the job done. And I am not prepared to let them endanger the security of millions of working people across the country. Because what they are doing jeopardizes the work we must do to prepare for Brexit at home. And it weakens the government's negotiating position in Europe. If we do not hold a general election now, their political game playing will continue. And the negotiations with the European Union will reach their most difficult stage in the run-up to the next scheduled election. Division in Westminster will risk our ability to make a success of Brexit, and it will cause damaging uncertainty and instability to the country. So we need a general election, and we need one now, because we have at this moment a one-off chance to get this done while the European Union agrees its negotiating position and before the detailed talks begin. I have only recently and reluctantly come to this conclusion. Since I became Prime Minister, I have said that there should be no election until 2020. But now I have concluded that the only way to guarantee certainty and stability for the years ahead is to hold this election and seek your support for the decisions I must take. And so tomorrow, I will move a motion in the House of Commons calling for a general election to be held on the 8th of June. That motion, as set out by the Fixed Term Parliament Act, will require a 2/3 majority of the House of Commons. So I have a simple challenge to the opposition parties. You have criticised the government's vision for Brexit. You have challenged our objectives. You have threatened to block the legislation we put before Parliament. This is your moment to show you mean it, to show you are not opposing the government for the sake of it, to show that you do not treat politics as a game. Let us tomorrow vote for an election. Let us put forward our plans for Brexit and our alternative programmes for government, and then let the people decide. And the decision facing the country will be all about leadership. It will be a choice between strong and stable leadership in the national interest, with me as your Prime Minister, or weak and unstable coalition government led by Jeremy Corbyn, propped up by the Liberal Democrats who want to reopen the divisions of the referendum, and Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP. Every vote for the Conservatives will make it harder for opposition politicians who want to stop me from getting the job done. Every vote for the Conservatives will make me stronger when I negotiate for Britain with the Prime Ministers, Presidents and Chancellors of the European Union. Every vote for the Conservatives will mean we can stick to our plan for a stronger Britain and take the right long-term decisions for a more secure future. It was with reluctance that I decided the country needs this election, but it is with strong conviction that I say it is necessary to secure the strong and stable leadership the country needs to see us through Brexit and beyond. So tomorrow, let the House of Commons vote for an election. Let everybody put forward their proposals for Brexit and their programmes for government. And let us remove the risk of uncertainty and instability and continue to give the country the strong and stable leadership it demands.
So there you have it. Theresa May very kindly waiting for us all to return from our Easter break to announce, what's that, the third nationwide poll in 2 years. I think we might be looking, and I'm going to open up the phone lines imminently, so feel free to disabuse me of this notion immediately. I think you might be looking at the end of the Labour Party as we know it, which presumably is why she's moved when she's moved. Two thoughts from me, just at the outset, just by way of provocation, if you will, for your own thoughts. The sense that Brexit isn't going very well was becoming irresistible. Stories emerging almost daily about how little was actually known about the scale of the task ahead. The best description I've heard is that people are finally beginning to realise that this is going to be like trying to remove the eggs from a cake. What's her option? Not going to turn around and say, we've made a horrible mistake, let's not do it. You have to double down in this way by banking on her leadership, if you will, and stability, although a general election is kind of historically the opposite of the stability that she promised to provide. It will at least provide a mandate that becomes unquestionable, even though an awful lot of people who probably don't want to leave the European Union are going to be choosing between what they see as a lesser of two evils. Do I want to keep Jeremy Corbyn out of Downing Street? Enough to vote for the party that's going to make the possibility of reversing Brexit absolutely zilch, absolutely zero. And then if that's not confusing enough for you, don't forget that Theresa May herself thinks that we do ourselves untold economic damage by continuing on the course that she's now telling us she wants to run an election on following. Whoa, phone lines are open. I'm tempted to say you know at least as much as any experts or political editors do, but given that Theo Usherwood is just about to speak to us, that would be rude. Theo Usherwood, there you go, June the 8th, we're on.
June the 8th, exactly, and it's going to be a very short campaign. Theresa May there even specified she didn't think that Jeremy Corbyn had a chance of becoming an outright Prime Minister, reverting to the attack lines that David Cameron used 2 years ago, that this would be, that if Jeremy Corbyn won, it would be with the support of Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP. It would have to be a coalition. She also pointed to the fact that she changed her mind because until very recently the Prime Minister's spokesman and the Prime Minister herself at every turn has said there would be no snap election.
I have just a meeting of the Cabinet where we agreed that the government should call a general election. There should be no general election until 2020.
Are you tempted in any way to call a snap election?
I think what's important, particularly having had the referendum vote, is that we have a period of stability. So I don't think there's a need for an election. I think the next election will be in 2020.
Under current law, the next election will be in 2020. No ifs, no buts, no snap elections, no changing the law. Under you, is that absolutely certain that we're not going to see an election before 2020?
I'm not going to be calling a snap election. I've been very clear that I think we need that period of time, that stability, to be able to deal with the issues that the country is facing and have that election in 2020.
The new government, shouldn't there therefore be a mandate? Do you really think you have a mandate to do some of the things that you want to do?
They elected a Conservative government on a manifesto which my Conservative government is putting into practice. And what we need is stability. You've talked about the economic situation, you've talked about markets. Actually, what markets want is stability, and a general election would give them instability. Let the House of Commons vote for an election. Let everybody put forward their proposals for Brexit and their programmes for government. And let us remove the risk of uncertainty and instability, and continue to give the country the strong and stable leadership it demands.
But off the back of the Article 50 announcement, she felt, obviously, right now, that in order to get through her mandate, she had to hold another poll, and the country had to be given that choice. Because remember, Theresa May was never elected. There was not even an election within the 300,000 or so Conservative Party members. And she's gone down this route of hard Brexit, and she can't turn around to the country and say that you voted for hard Brexit. There was a referendum on our membership of the European Union, and of course that raises various political choices, alternatives. Some have talked about a soft Brexit with fewer controls on immigration, but we remain part of the single market. So Theresa May today deciding that in fact that referendum wasn't enough to get through her mandate for a hard Brexit, and therefore she's decided to call a general election.
Well, doesn't it actually remove rejection or opposition to any form of Brexit? Because you look over the stories over the last few days, Theo Ashwood, and you see these so-called barista visas. You see people talking about how we are actually going to need just as much immigration as we've currently got. You see people talking about the disappearance of the European Union agencies governing medicine and other and finance going back to continental Europe. The kind of, if you like, vaguely shambolic response of some of the key politicians. What she might be doing is in fact saying, well, look, this is the best way of ensuring that nobody can actually object to whatever it is we get. So it might not just be the soft Brexiteers that she's trying to castrate. It might also be the people who are obsessed with immigration, so that the deal, when it comes in, if freedom of movement is diluted but not completely removed, they can't resist, they can't reject that either.
This is, in the wider context, this is about, if you like, parliamentary mechanics, that when she comes back with a deal, she wants to be able to get it through Parliament. She referred, of course, to the Liberal Democrats and to Labour blocking it with coming back with that.
Yeah, but who do you think, honestly, sorry to interrupt you, you know what I'm like on days like this, and you're the same, so we'll indulge each other's inner anorak, and then we'll go to the phones after the travel news. But who does she fear most when it comes to getting that through Parliament, or politically for her own future? Does she fear the hard rump of her own party, the real staunch Brexiteers, the hard Brexiteers, will throw a spanner in the works, or does she really think that Jeremy Corbyn might be able to get his act together to do so, despite the fact that he said he doesn't really want to?
I think actually what she fears is the hard Brexiteers coming together with the arch Remainers to torpedo her final result. And there's been a lot of speculation that you could find the likes of, let's say, Keir Starmer, who's the shadow Brexit secretary, forming an unholy alliance for the Prime Minister, coming together with, I'm thinking of backbenchers like Jacob Rees-Mogg or Kwasi Kwarteng on the Conservative Party, who really want that hard Brexit, and both being unhappy with the deal. And what she is doing by this is, and we saw her in a poll at the weekend over the Easter break, the Tories have a 21-point lead over Labour, that if she can ramp up the Conservative majority to, let's say, moving on towards 100, that in effect, and the rest, and Labour then fall perhaps as low as 150, that in actual fact, when it comes to that vote, she can simply get it through because she has the mandate in Parliament. The other thing to think about very quickly is that she doesn't have a mandate to take Britain, and her biggest threat to date, and it came in the Lancaster House speech, revert to WTO rules, World Trade Organization rules, and crash out of the European Union if she doesn't get the vote that if she doesn't get the deal that she wants. And we heard from Nigel Farage in the European Parliament last week, and the way that he was ramping up the rhetoric and the hard lines being played by the likes of Jean-Claude Juncker and Donald Tusk at the European Council, saying that they're not going to cave in because the existence of the European Union is under threat by Brexit. Therefore, she can't get the deal. She may have to crash out. That is certainly looking more likely than it did a couple of months ago when she first mentioned it in her Lancaster House speech. So by doing this, she hopes that she will give herself the options to get exactly what she wants and to put her critics to rest.
The country is coming together, but Westminster isn't, blaming Labour and the Liberal Democrats and the SNP for holding the view that until June the 24th she held herself. I mean, we're in very strange political times, but I can't think of any peacetime politics stranger than this.
You say that, and without, I think there is a little bit of truth to the way that Theresa May and the Conservative Party HQ will be looking at the country at the moment. Because if you look at what happened in the by-elections, firstly in Copeland, where the sitting party took a seat off the opposition in a by-election for the first time in 35 years, and then what happened in Stoke, which is a Labour heartland, and their candidate, the Conservative candidate there, Jack Brereton, which I think was the most extraordinary result of the night, coming a very close third in what should be a majority, in what should be a constituency where the Labour Party enjoys a majority running into the double digits. There is some method to there is some reason behind what Theresa May has said there, that she's done the calculations. Her analysts and experts and polling gurus have done the calculations, and actually she thinks she can pull the country together behind her and take and return to Parliament on June the 9th with a whopping majority.
And yet a significant swathe of the country will be finding themselves now torn between the two futures, neither of which they want. One in which we carry on leaving the European Union, the other in which Jeremy Corbyn is Prime Minister. So who now speaks for people who want to remain?
That's parliamentary democracy, James.
Isn't it?
But and this is a big but, expect the Liberal Democrats to make some serious headway. They currently have 9 MPs, up from 8 2 years ago. They took that big by-election result down in Richmond, with Sarah Olney taking that off Zach Goldsmith. And there are a number of Tories in southwest London and in the southwest of the country, down in Devon and Cornwall, who are nervous, very nervous about what a general election could bring with the Liberal Democrats. They have, when it's working and it's up and running, an effective campaigning machine. If they can make themselves the party of remaining within the European Union, then they can expect to do very well. But will they go beyond 30, 40 seats? Question mark over that. Of course, they'll take some seats off the Tories, and they may take a few off Labour as well. But will they become such a political force in Parliament, at least, that they can actually stop Theresa May?
All right, try this on for size finally, Theo Ashwood, because you're going to have a busy day. Can we, you know me, I'm always looking for things that everyone can agree on. Can we agree that the advice Theresa May has received and the conclusion at which she has arrived is that it is unlikely that things are going to get better between now and 2020. The likelihood is she must have calculated that things will probably get worse. She will never be stronger going to the country than she is now. Or am I reading a little bit too much into it?
What's that quote? It's the economy, stupid. And I'm sure...
Just for the record, that is a quote, not a term of endearment that Theo Ashwood uses to me on air.
But it's important, because if you think about the economic cycle and you think about Brexit coming to a head in 2019, and if we're unable to get a deal, or we have to revert to transitional arrangements both are hypotheses. But the point I'm making is that in fact, if you look at the calculation that Theresa May will be making, is that it's about the fact that we could be in a recession.
So she goes to the country, she gets a 5-year mandate, things go south, but she's got more time for things to go north again, in the hope of going back to the country in 2022 and saying, well, look, we're out of the woods. We're back in clover.
Exactly.
Theo Usherwood, many thanks indeed. 22 minutes after 11 is the time. Oh man, I love days like this. I'm so lucky to thank God she didn't do this while I was on holiday. It was bad enough missing the early stages of what might turn out to be World War III. Now we've got the mother of all elections in living memory. I would argue this is going to be the most significant. What question would you like to answer, let alone ask? What do Remainers do? This notion that somehow the planets are aligning to make Brexit look like a good idea is palpably absurd, and yet even the most ardent Remainers must be yearning slightly just for an end to all the speculation. The world's not going to sink. The country's not going to disappear from the face of the earth. It's accepted as a fait accompli, and then you can get on with the business of governing. Then you can get on with addressing all of the other issues that are being ignored as the Brexit wrangling continues. Is it fair for her to lay the blame at the feet of Tim Farron, Nicola Sturgeon and Jeremy Corbyn? Does it convince you that they're somehow the reason for this? Or is it, as Theo Usherwood and I just cautiously suggested, rather more the case that she doesn't think it's going to get any better than it is now? There's one of the pro-Brexit think tanks put out some research today saying, oh, none of the predictions have come true, and I found myself reading it. It's a think tank that Michael Gove's involved in. I found myself reading it and thinking, as I think almost daily now when reading these sort of stories, we haven't actually left yet. It doesn't, I mean, the consumer spending, great. Everyone's still going out and spending money because they don't realise what's around the corner, or they haven't been hit by the price rises yet. We stumble into World Trade Organization rules and we run the risk of pretty much dropping off the table, economically speaking. She can see all this on the horizon. And if there's a threat of a general election behind that horizon, then the problems become multiplied. You can tell I'm sort of just thinking out loud on this one, but if she's done it because she can't imagine things getting any better than they are now, I would cautiously suggest to you that's kind of scary. I would also cautiously suggest to you that we may be looking at the end of the Labour Party in its current form. Make of that what you will, for good or for ill. Jeremy Corbyn now is charged with convincing the country that he is the right man to lead it. I would remind you that the most recent polling, and you can poo-poo polls as much as you please, the most recent polling has more people expressing a belief in the existence of alien life than it does a desire or a belief that Jeremy Corbyn would be the most effective Prime Minister of all the current party leaders. I have a little suggestion to make, and we'll see where the phones go on this. You're in charge now, right up until 1 o'clock, okay? But here's my thought. I think I'm 45 years old. Off the top of my head, I can't remember how many general elections I voted in or indeed been alive for, but I studied politics A-level, so my knowledge of electoral matters goes back to at least the 60s. I don't think we have ever had a general election on the horizon at a time when so many people feel utterly unrepresented democratically. Utterly unrepresented. You may, for example, want to see a vague redistribution of wealth, which the Labour Party are offering. Today they're talking about keeping inheritance tax in place for estates valued over £1 million and using the money to give more money to carers. I love that kind of policy. But do I love it enough to vote for a Labour Party that is also woolly on Trident and other issues? If Brexit is the defining political issue of our age, and I think you'd have to be fairly bonkers to argue with that observation, if you are increasingly persuaded that it's not going to be what you thought it was going to be. Let's just put it that way. I keep trying to find a phrase that everyone can agree on. I can't deal with the people who are of the view that, look, Brexit is good, whatever happens. That to me is an abnegation of intelligence. That to me is an insult to yourself, let alone to everybody you're talking to. When you say, I don't care what it is, it's going to be good. That's just stupid. I would cautiously suggest to you, becoming increasingly hard to argue that we're going to be better off than we are now. Is that fair? That's why you use the lines about passports and identity and borders, because you need to explain to people why they are materially worse off. And you have to give them something that they consider to be worth it. Making that a price worth paying. Yeah, I am materially worse off, but at least I've got a blue passport, for example. Now, I find that baffling, but I completely accept that some people find it truly important, the colour of their passport. I don't know that anybody is going to argue in this coming general election that leaving the European Union is going to make us better off than we are now. All they're going to be arguing about is the variations on how much worse off we will be. That's terrifying, because that means people who don't want to leave have no party to vote for except the Liberal Democrats, which history suggests is too small to take up that mantle. What's your first thought on hearing about this general election? 0345 6060 973. Who speaks for you? And are we going to come back to Paul in Sheffield, who rang in about a month ago, and one of those callers that stayed with me? It was in the aftermath of that Copeland by-election. He was a lifelong Labour supporter from the heartland, the very heartland of the Labour movement, the old steelworks of Sheffield, the trade union stronghold of Sheffield, my mother's hometown, so I know a little bit about it. And he effectively described voting for Theresa May, voting for the Conservative Party, against almost all of his better instincts. He could not bring himself to vote for Jeremy Corbyn on a simple question of competence. Take it up with Paul. Calls on the website. He could not bring himself to vote for the Liberal Democrats on a simple question of plausibility, electoral plausibility. He pretty much derided everything that Conservative politics stood for, but looking at the starting field of party leaders, he was left with two choices. He would either vote for Theresa May's Conservative Party, or he would not vote at all. That's not really democracy. Your thoughts on this? The number you need is 0345 6060 973. I've currently got one phone line free. Grab it. What are you going to do? I mean, seriously, this is the most interesting election that we will, please God, ever have to talk about. I can't deal with anything more interesting than this one. More interesting than this one is World War territory, isn't it? But the reason this is so fascinating is that so many ancient loyalties are left at the door. You've got a significant number of Conservative voters who are terrified at the prospect of the economic damage that appears to be around the corner. You've got a significant number of Labour voters who are terrified at the prospect of Jeremy Corbyn getting his hands on anywhere near the reins of power. You've got Liberal Democrat voters who probably feel that their party might be embarking upon the kind of rehabilitation it's needed ever since Nick Clegg went into coalition and jettisoned the tuition fees. Or what? What have you got? The Greens? Are they going to do something special? Anything could happen. But my problem, my question, my fear is that more people listening to this programme at this point in time feel unrepresented in our parliamentary democracy than at any other point in living memory, which wouldn't be a problem if we didn't have a general election coming up on June the 8th. So here we are.
The country is coming together, but Westminster is not. In recent weeks, Labour have threatened to vote against the final agreement we reach with the European Union. The Liberal Democrats have said they want to grind the business of government to a standstill. The Scottish National Party say they will vote against the legislation that formally repeals Britain's membership of the European Union.
And I just have one abiding question. I've written down three questions for you, but then listening back to that, I've kind of tucked them all into one big one. I've got three questions written down. Labour, question mark. What happens now? All right, that is just fascinating, potentially terrifying, if you believe in sort of plurality. Why now? 0345 6060 973. And who speaks for you? Who speaks for you? Because that's my fear here, just as one observer and voter. Man who's deeply concerned about the direction in which his country seems to be going at the moment in all sorts of ways. I cannot sit here and say to you, I don't think I'm allowed to anyway, even if I could, but I cannot sit here and say to you that mast, no mast is perfect, but it's clear to me to which mast I shall nail my colours. And I suspect that I speak for a lot of people when I say that. This is really tough. Why now, though? Why is she doing it now? 0345 6060 973. And the question that I really... See, just do that again, will you, Axel? Just the very, very first bit of it.
The country is coming together, but Westminster is not. In recent weeks, Labour have threatened to vote against the final agreement we reach.
And this for me is a huge issue. That it's perfectly possible I'm missing something. Good knows, it wouldn't be the first time. Labour in recent weeks has threatened to vote against the final deal that we reach. What if it's rubbish? I don't understand why that's problematical in a parliamentary democracy, in a sovereign parliament that, guess what, turns out we've had all along anyway. If it's a really rubbish deal that they get, what is wrong with Her Majesty's opposition expressing a freedom to vote against it? And she's obviously worried that they could win, because if you've got the entire Labour Party plus the SNP plus the Eurosceptic wing of the Conservative Party, who probably won't be happy with whatever deal she brings back because it won't involve essentially pulling up some mythical drawbridge and sailing off to the 17th century, she could lose. What if the deal is rubbish? Why shouldn't the Labour Party be able to vote against it? So why now? What's she trying to achieve? And who speaks for you? Joe Twyman is the head of political and social research for the polling company YouGov. He joins me on the line now. Joe, partly for personal reasons, because I don't want to fall foul of Ofcom regulations, and partly for the benefit of my listeners, just talk us through the election process that kicks off after that vote in Parliament tomorrow.
Okay, so we have there's a fixed period of time during which the election, there's a minimum set of time after which the election can take place, and so Theresa May has signalled that 8th of June is the date. And so what I assume will happen, and you'll have to forgive me, but even my knowledge of the Fixed Term Parliament Act is a bit struck out. What I think it will happen is that the vote will be made tomorrow. Once that passes, that will then signal the start, that we will then have 4 weeks of campaigning. So that would be, yeah, forgive me, I'm literally looking at the
That's all right, we all
dates
are.
in front of me. So I think that means we will be starting official campaigning around mid-May, and then working up to the final analysis on the 8th.
Interesting polling recently. I don't know whether YouGov was responsible for it, but I'm sure you would have seen it, that some of the policies that the Labour Party has been unveiling in recent weeks are enjoying a degree of popularity with the country, and yet none of that is impacting upon the personal popularity ratings of the Labour leader.
Or indeed the party's popularity. And this is a key point that is sometimes lost when people think about how voting takes place. Sometimes we like to think of this perfect voter sitting at home and downloading or getting copies of each of the
Yes.
manifestos, reading each one, perhaps making notes, and then coming to a considered opinion on that based on the policies. But in actual fact, if that person does exist, they're not very common. Instead, people make judgments based on what we call valence issues, heuristics, the rules of thumb, narratives, the stories that we tell ourselves and each other. Is this person trustworthy? Can they be effective? Are they a strong leader? Are they good for people like me? Can they be good on the economy and deliver things? People aren't really concerned about minutiae beyond that. And so that's very important, because yes, some of the individual policies that Labour have put forward have been very popular. Similarly, some of the popular policies they put forward, or at least have alluded to, have been very unpopular. And a lot of this will come down to things like leadership and whether people think that Jeremy Corbyn is the best person to be Prime Minister. Historically speaking, it's never been the case that a party has won when it's behind on best Prime Minister and behind on best party on the economy. And this time, yes, we have Brexit, but I expect that to hold again.
And it was a YouGov poll, I think, this weekend that gave the Conservatives a 21-point lead. I'm putting you on the spot now, but I make no apology for it. What would that translate to in terms of seats, roughly?
Well, we're looking at Labour perhaps being on only perhaps 130 seats, as low as that. The Conservatives would certainly be on a 3-figure majority. I mean, if you use the example of 1983. Then the Conservatives won 42% versus Labour's 28%, and that was enough for a 144-seat majority. Currently, the Conservatives won 44, so 2 ahead on that. Labour on 23, 5 below. But, of course, this could all change. We may have seen a massive realignment as a result of Brexit, and when the campaign starts to roll, we may see a lot of things changing. The world and politics have changed massively just in the last couple of years, and so. But
like what? You sort of mooting the possibility of some form of progressive alliance, or?
Well, I think to organise that in the 6 weeks that are available, I think is highly unlikely. But quite frankly, politics in the last couple of years has taught taught me that nothing is completely outside the realms of possibility. We don't know what impact the French French presidential election will have on things. All of these things could have a massive impact. I think if I had to pick a side at the moment, yes, of course, I would say the Conservatives are most likely to win, given the historical precedent, given their current polling. But as I say, Brexit may have caused a kind of complete realignment of British politics in the same way that Scotland did with the Scottish referendum.
Joe Twyman from YouGov, many thanks indeed. This just in from the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. I welcome the Prime Minister's decision to give the British people the chance to vote for a government that will put the interests of the majority first. But who will vote for him? 0345 606 0973. Let's go to Billericay. Jason's there. Jason, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello.
Firstly, if you're...
Right, let's do this again. I'm getting the excitement levels ramped up to 11. All right, Jason, and you've come on like a damp sponge. Let's do this again. Right, Jason is in Billericay. Jason, general election, man, what would you want to say?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say if your summary had been put out there and had been more widely available pre the referendum, I think people would have seen things a lot more clearly. Secondly, as a natural Labour supporter, I can't support Jeremy Corbyn.
Why not?
He doesn't speak for me. He doesn't speak for my values. He wanders around on the periphery of issues, and he's never where I need him to be. I need someone I can trust, and though I'm a lifelong Labour supporter, I can't trust Mr. Corbyn. I can't trust Miss Abbott. They change views as they change the way they present views to think that this is what the people actually need. However, the narrative shows, and the stories that come out show that they're still not supported. Mr. Fallon, I've got a great deal of sympathy for.
Doesn't want your sympathy, mate. He wants your vote.
Well, I would love to feel that I could put my trust in him. This comes back to very much what you said. Who speaks for me? And at the moment, I'm terrified because none of the main political parties speak for me. I don't know who to give my vote to.
They've never spoken for you verbatim, have they? No party has ever completely 100% represented your interests. We all do a little bit of waxing and waning, a little bit of give and take. But you feel if I'm picking up Tim Farron notwithstanding, and that may well turn out to be the most interesting element of this election, you feel unrepresented at this time of supposedly having got our country back and reclaimed democracy. You feel utterly unrepresented.
I feel there's no one there for me right now, and there's no one.
What if Corbyn did a full U-turn? What if Corbyn now came out and said, and whether it would persuade you or not, if he simply said it, we will resist Brexit at every turn. We are the party of union and unity. We will lead Britain into a glorious new future where it remembers who its friends are and doesn't turn her back on them.
No, I can't trust him. I can't trust the man. If the man had been there during the Brexit campaign, and had nailed his colours to the mast, then I could have been with him. But no, he went on holiday. He went here. He went there. Right? We got the result that we got.
So what are you going to do then?
Well, I voted. I'm a very active member of democracy. I voted in every election.
What are you going to do?
Well, at the moment, I think none of the above and abstaining is probably the best I can do for this country. The reason Theresa May has called this election...
Then you might as well vote for her.
Well, exactly. The default then will win. The reason she's called this election now is she thinks she can win. Because she's a politician and she wants to govern, she thinks she can win. Okay, Mr. Corbyn, whatever he says, will be looking around for the next scrap of paper to get out his next press release on. Mr. Fallon, I think he's a genuine man, but I don't think has got the machine to get this done. I
wrote down the words that Joe Twyman from YouGov used because I was fairly confident I wouldn't remember. Valences and heuristics, which I think loosely boils down to the feelings that these people give you. And I sense when you talk about Tim Farron, you recognise his qualities and indeed his sincerity and his consistency with regard to Brexit, but the feelings that he gives you, those chills are not multiplying. It's 11:45. It's on, June the 8th, general election. For anyone who's not had enough of nationwide polls and referendums, we've got the biggest one of all on the way. What will inform your vote? Who will speak for you? Why has she called it now? And what happens next to the Labour Party? I'll just read you something from 3 weeks ago. Downing Street has categorically denied that Theresa May will capitalise on the chronic weakness of the opposition Labour Party by calling a snap general election possibly as soon as May the 4th. There isn't going to be one. It isn't going to happen. There is not going to be a general election, Mrs May's spokesman said. Prime Minister had previously insisted that calling an election would be a significant distraction from the task of delivering Brexit. But if we know anything about Theresa May, it's that she's not backwards in coming forwards when it comes to changing her mind. Margaret Beckett is the Labour MP for Derby South, a former Foreign Secretary, and if memory serves, very briefly leader of the Labour Party. She joins me on the line now. You've got weeks to fix that chronic weakness, Margaret. Can the party do it?
Well, obviously everybody will be busting their guts to give the best possible result that we can. But I think you absolutely put your finger on something very important there. Theresa May is becoming notorious for changing her mind and changing her stance. And I think one of the things that it does is it exposes not the strength, but the weakness of her position. Because there are two things that strike me forcibly. First is, she's got a very small majority, and she's getting into a period now of serious negotiation when all hell is going to break loose in her own party. So I think this is very much in the interest of the Conservative Party rather than of the country. And the second thing, which again is very important, they are pushing through a whole plethora of cuts made by George Osborne. They haven't bitten yet. So they're in the pipeline, the legislation's done, but people haven't felt the effects. Have an election before they do.
But then she gives herself until 2022 to see green shoots of recovery or a return from whatever privations you believe will be created by those cuts.
That might be all she wants. I mean, don't forget, she's had a long career in senior office. She's now made it to be Prime Minister. She has diabetes. There have been a few stories lately about how exhausting she finds the job of Prime Minister, which I don't blame her for at all. So, it might just suit her. So for the convenience of the Tory party and for the convenience of the Prime Minister.
Forgive me, are you suggesting that she might fight this election and then step down before the next one?
Yes.
Okay. No, I just wanted to be clear. Can I briefly, Margaret Beckett, introduce you to a theoretical voter who has discovered in recent months or since last June a hitherto untapped passion for European Union membership, moving, shall we say, from ambivalence to a deep desire to remain. They're also worried that perhaps some of the beasts unleashed by the propaganda surrounding Brexit will turn their attention next to the National Health Service or the welfare state. They fear for the future of their country. They lean to the left, and yet they find Jeremy Corbyn utterly uninspiring. Who would you advise them to vote for?
I'm afraid they've got to hold their noses and vote Labour. That's the only option that makes any sense, whatever their reservations.
But Jeremy Corbyn has done very little to suggest that he'd fight to stay in the European Union.
No, I don't think that's just. I think Jeremy isn't a great enthusiast, and we all take the view that there's a lot about the European Union that needs to be reformed. Not least, the European Union needs to turn its face against austerity politics in the way that we want the UK to do. But push comes to shove, you have to make up your mind. People will have the chance to go to the ballot box. They'll look at what is in store for them with the Conservative Party, and they'll have to decide whether that's the road they want to travel.
Do you realise, as someone who did lead the party briefly after John Smith's passing, and as a former Foreign Secretary, as a long-standing deputy leader of the Labour Party, you've just told traditional Labour voters that they should hold their nose if they're going to vote for the current leader?
Excuse me, it was you who said that people will not want to vote because of Jeremy, and I said, well, if there are people who feel like that...
Well, you know there are. You've seen the polling.
I've seen the polling, yeah, I've seen plenty of polling, and not all of it's been right. But the main thing is, now, people really have got a major decision to make. Do they want to risk the Conservative Party wrecking everything that's been taken for granted in this country since the Second World War, or are they going to take a risk and vote for the Labour Party? That's their choice.
Indeed it is, although Tim Farron may beg to differ. Margaret Beckett, many thanks indeed. Let's go next to Surrey. Sue is in Cheam. Sue, what's on your mind?
Hello, my lovely.
Hello, Sue.
As somebody who's...
Why doesn't Margaret Beckett greet me like that? That's what I want to know. Carry on.
As somebody who's voted Lib Dem in this borough to keep the Tories out for as long as I can remember, Theresa May's done something this morning that has made me going to utter words that I never thought I'd say, which is that I'm going to vote Tory on the 8th of June. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I just think this is a time when we should all get behind her, send out a strong signal to Brussels that she has our support, which will enable her to get a better deal in Europe.
Why?
Because all the time she's being pulled down and there's all this dissent in all the different areas, this is not doing our image any good whatsoever.
But why would Brussels care? I mean, the vote has been taken. The referendum result is, close but conclusive. They're going to act in whatever is in their best interest. Or what possible reason would they have for somehow softening the deal or giving us something they'd rather not give us just because Theresa May has a slightly stronger mandate than she has currently?
Well, at the moment, because we are appearing so dishevelled in all the areas of our government, the Labour Party, there's dissent there, and I just think if we all pull together, at least it will show that we are behind her in what we're saying. And I know that they're only...
What about, sorry to interrupt you, Sue, because I don't want to crash the news. What about that line, the very first line she uttered, that Labour have... I mean, you can't escape the fact, even though Margaret Beckett just tried to. Labour's policy is now to leave the European Union. They've made that clear. They'd have to undertake an unprecedented U-turn to change that. So I don't quite understand why anybody would be comfortable with what she said about Labour suggesting that they might vote against whatever deal we get. They're committed to leaving, but she doesn't want the opposition to have the power or the freedom or the mandate to say that deal is rubbish. What if they come back from Brussels with a pile of shredded wheat, Sue? Who's going to stand up? Who's going to be in your world able to turn around and say, no, we don't want that? If that's really the best you can do, then I'm going to hold my nose and stay in the European Union.
The thing is, one of the biggest issues, I think, for Jeremy Corbyn is that he is saying that he is going to continue with the migration policy so that the borders will still be open, as far as, unless you can correct me on that, but that's what I've been...
Say that again, sorry.
Sorry?
Say that last bit again, the thing you want me to correct you on.
Well, you know what I'm talking about. But the thing is, this is his Achilles heel as far as I'm concerned, because people just want to be able to protect the country. They want to be able to protect our borders. It doesn't mean to say we don't want people coming to the country. We just want to know who is actually coming into the country, and this is one of the principal issues, I think, which is causing the Labour Party...
yeah, you know, how boring I get with my facts and my knowledge, and the system under the membership of the European Union allowed us that freedom completely. It just was during the referendum campaign, people chose not to endorse that fact or indeed even mention it. And I don't know, one thing I really wish, really profoundly, sincerely wish, is that the immigration issue doesn't play a massive role in this election, because it is such a meaningless red herring, as we're already discovering. Even the most ardent Brexiteers now turning around and saying, oh, actually, we're probably going to need just as many people as we had before. But as Sue says, this obsession with somehow knowing who they are and what they represent has sort of run away with the cart, really. It's coming up to 12 noon. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I disagree with Sue. I don't believe that this election will have any effect whatsoever on the quality of deal that the European Union is prepared to offer us. And I think that deal is going to be so demonstrably inferior to what we currently have that the choice will be bad deal or no deal, with no deal being worse than bad deal. And yet this point of view, which is all it is utterly unrepresented in the electoral landscape, unless you see the Liberal Democrats as a meaningful fighting force, as a potential government. I think they've got fewer MPs at the moment than I've got toes. The idea that they could form a government come June the 9th is pretty much the only straw that people who would probably describe themselves as outward-looking social democrats, the only straw they have to clutch to is Tim Farron flavoured. More of your thoughts after this. It's like April Fool's Day every day at the moment. I was just thinking, if you've just woken up and you hear me say on the radio, we're having a general election on June the 8th, everybody, you're going to think I'm yanking your chain, aren't you? But guess what? Donald Trump is president of America. And we are having a general election on June the 8th. Luckily, Donald Trump's not currently planning to run. Why are we having an election on June the 8th? I'd love you to tell me your answer to that question. Mine is that the, what would you call it? The Brexit project is becoming increasingly difficult to camouflage. In other words, the argument that we're going to be somehow better off out than in is now utterly discredited. So what you need to do in order to still shore up support for being out is appeal to the increasingly hollow memes like the colour of your passport or these ludicrous claims about not making our own laws or Parliament not being sovereign. That ship has sort of sailed. And the cold, hard reality of how much your weekly shop is going to cost, how much the impact of seeing EU agencies flee to the continent is going to trickle down to other people, how many jobs will be lost, how many disasters may occur in the event of us being forced to revert to World Trade Organization rules. There are icebergs galore on the horizon, and Theresa May wants to massively increase her parliamentary majority before we start hitting them, because then when we do start hitting them, she can turn around and say quite rightly that the country voted for this. In other words, to careen into that iceberg at 100 miles an hour is the will of the people. And then we come to Corbyn, the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, whose party have already pledged commitment to the referendum result at a time when many people probably feel that the biggest opportunity the Labour Party will have in the next decade would be to today, right now, start offering a meaningful case for having another referendum, or at least having some form of vote on the deal that they finally come back from Brussels with. And then you've got the Liberal Democrats, or the possibility of a, what would you call it, a progressive alliance, where the SNP set aside for the moment the independence question, join forces with the Labour Party, the small but increasingly effective number of Liberal Democrat MPs, the single Green would be in there as well, and they somehow come together to offer up a alternative. But if you were a Liberal Democrat, would you really want to be swapping Tim Farron's leadership for Jeremy Corbyn's? And if you were a Scott Nat, well, you do the math. Maria's in Putney. Maria, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello,
yeah,
Maria.
This all took me by surprise, to be honest.
Well, don't worry, you're not alone.
No, I really did. But I have to say that, yeah, I think she's chosen to go now because she can see that things aren't going very well, and I think a lot of it's being...
Now, hang on, the lobbyists and the cheerleaders are still telling us everything's going brilliantly.
Yeah, well, I don't think things are going that well, and I don't think they've been going well for a while. I mean, my neighbour's been trying to sell her flat since last August. Only now has she managed to sell it with a 50k drop. And I think that that's indicative, because I've been looking at all of the websites for selling properties. That's indicative across London, as far as I can see, unless you've got a house in a particular family.
Even if you have, Chiswick's stone dead. Chiswick is stone dead, the property movement in Chiswick. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dead as a dodo.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's still some people who've got the money and want to move, if they've maybe buying a significant property and they've got lots of money in the bank. But other people are only buying it if they can get it at a good old knockdown, and they feel that they're in the driving seat. So I think that's going badly, and it's been going badly for a while. I think that's been suppressed. I think that's barely been flagged up. There was a story the other day of what Zoopla said, but essentially that's been really, really suppressed, and that's not a good thing. We should be honest about what's going on. Also, if I go into my high street, loads more closed down shops. That's been going on for ages and ages and ages, so I can't even blame exiting Europe for that. It just seems to have got a little bit worse.
No, well, that's the internet. I think what might kick in the next...
shops are even closing down.
Oh, well, that will be disposable income, won't it? And so what are you going to do? How are you going to vote? Well, you're the Maria in Putney who may have been the person responsible for Jeremy Corbyn's first ever question at PMQs, aren't you?
Well, I was, but, you know, it's a real difficult one for me, because I was in favour of leaving Europe. At the same time, my politics are aligned to Labour, not to the Conservatives. So it's a very, very tricky one for me. This is a very stony road, and to be honest with you, there is no good path on this road.
That's a very astute observation, actually. And are you still in favour of leaving the European Union?
Yes, I am still in favour, absolutely. I still want to leave, and I hope that eventually things will settle down. But I anticipate there will be many problems, as there already are, and as there always have been. It seems to me that we've constantly been in recession. Things improved a little bit, but we bring a lot as a society on ourselves, because our economy is built on sand. That's the way I see it. It's built on a strong property market. We don't,
financial services, which we're going to, unfortunately, your vote we're going to wave goodbye to.
Yeah, I mean, if we made lots of strong products like the Germans do, then we could hold Europe a little bit to ransom by saying, well, we're not going to sell you, we're going to put all of our products...
Hang on a minute, you voted to leave and you're now slowly dismantling that they need us more than we need them argument quite beautifully.
Well, I don't. I've never thought that. I've never subscribed that. I want to leave. I'm a pragmatist. I understand where the pitfalls lie.
Who are you going to vote for?
I see where problems are going to be.
Who are you going to vote for?
Often before they occur.
Who are you going to vote for?
Sorry, who am I going to vote for? Well, I'll have to vote for the Tories.
There you go.
Because they're the only ones who want to follow through with the mandate that I just voted for in the referendum. But as to say, it's not...
Labour have said they're going to.
For me. Well, Labour are confused, aren't they, at the moment on many levels? I mean, it's a difficult one because I agree with many of their policies, as I say. Issues. I'm talking about issues in this country, but at the end of the day, there are other things where clearly Jeremy Corbyn is confused and he doesn't come across as convincing.
Well, there's two different accusations you level at him. He might be both confused and unconvincing, but he could be unconfused and unconvincing. He'd probably refute the idea that he was confused. He'd claim he had excellent clarity on all sorts of issues. Whether he's convincing or not is in the eye of the voter, and in this case it's you, and you ain't convinced. Harry is in Gillingham. Harry, what's going on?
Hi, James. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
You've chosen your movement.
Yeah, I know, right? I feel pretty betrayed this morning, really, by Jeremy Corbyn. I've been a Labour member, actually signed up to Labour to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. I was a part of that movement, and I felt jolly good about it at the time.
Yeah.
Now I look at it, the man's released a statement that doesn't even mention Europe, doesn't even mention Brexit on the day that the general election has been called, that could very well wipe Labour off Britain's political map.
Do you really think so? Do you think it could be that dire?
If it's as tragic as Corbyn's reign has been so far, then yeah.
Interesting that you mentioned the absence of the B word from Jeremy Corbyn's statement. I've got Nicola Sturgeon's in front of me. She said the Tories, and I quote now, see a chance to move the UK to the right, force through a hard Brexit and impose deeper cuts. And she inevitably added, let's stand up for Scotland. So you're right, perhaps, to point out Jeremy Corbyn's failure to even mention the biggest political issue of our time.
Well, Tim Farron released a statement very quickly.
Yes, he has.
Quicker than anyone else, apart from obviously Theresa May, who was at the lectern. He mentioned Brexit. He said, if you want to avoid a disastrous hard Brexit, if you want to keep Britain in the single market, that's what I want to do. That's who I'm going to vote for. You're right in what you said earlier, in that they have probably as many MPs as you have toes, but I can't betray my own conscience when I step into the booth.
So it's going to be a Lib Dem vote for you?
It has to be.
And you've never voted for them before?
No.
And I mean, there's constituency relevant as well, of course. We should make that point. We always talk about general elections as if it's a plebiscite, a national vote, and however they divvy up the seats at the end of it depends on how the votes are cast nationally. They're not. You could vote Labour in some constituencies, even if a Cantaloupe melon was standing with a red rosette, they'd get in, and vice versa. The Tories, Lib Dems less so. They have some safe seats, but the last general election suggested even they're perhaps not as safe as some hope. Clara is in Chelsea. Clara, what would you like to say?
Oh, I'm just really glad it's been called this morning, James. And I wouldn't be surprised if we hear from Nick Clegg and Tony Blair and a few of the other big hitters later to say they're starting another party. Because absolutely every fibre of my being is against leaving Europe. I'm sorry, I just think it's wrong. And I think this gives us a chance. Whoever comes up with a second referendum will get my vote. It won't be Theresa May.
So somebody says, well, it's not even a second referendum from where I'm sitting. It just seems to me that one line that I found really quite troublesome, even in these troublesome times, the idea that by saying that they reserve the right to vote against whatever deal comes back, while simultaneously saying that they support leaving the European Union, the Labour Party have somehow done something wrong. They come back with a really poor deal, nobody's allowed to say so. That seems to be the world she's trying to create. Unlike you, I think she's going to succeed.
You see, I don't think she is, James. I think she, and part of me thinks, oh gosh, I take my hat off to her this morning, because she would have been someone I would have ordinarily voted for, but I couldn't possibly. It would be against everything I believe in, and I couldn't possibly. I'd rather not vote than vote for her.
Good Lord.
And I am absolutely against the way they did the referendum, and I'm not saying it was the worst thing to leave Europe if we'd been told the truth. But because of the way everything was conducted from the beginning, I just feel the whole thing, it's like we're jumping off a cliff. And Theresa May has even said she's against it, but she's still leading us. It's like leading us into just a bomb when she knows it's there and it's going to go off. But
here's the thing. Here are the two phrases that I suspect historians of the future will see as at least chapter headings. The sort of defining sound bites of our time. Brexit means Brexit, an utterly hollow and fatuous soundbite, but she knew what she was doing when she coined it. It's essentially saying to people, doesn't matter what it looks like, we're going to do it, and that's what those people wanted to hear. And then the other element of it is the will of the people, which is a slightly sinister phrase.
The problem is, the thing is for me, if we'd been told the truth, and it had really been done properly, and we'd had all the factors we should have done, it's only now. I mean, I run a tiny little company. I've already lost business. I just, I was warned last week by my sector that, things are really tough out there. And I just don't understand. It's like I'm watching the lunatics in the asylum. I don't get what I'm missing.
Well, you just don't get it, you mean? Because I get told this a lot as well. I kind of see the world similarly to how you see it. It just seems to me that whatever the benefits may be, and I wish someone would hurry up and explain them to me, they're essentially emotional and unconvincing, whereas the disbenefits, if you like, the things that are going to hurt, are clear and present. And yet, you're right, it does feel as if that's almost a controversial point of view, when really it's simply like describing a view out of a window.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
I mean, if she does carry on, I wish her well, because I want the country to do well. So don't get me wrong, I really hope. But I cannot stand behind something I am against, and it doesn't feel right. It just you could not persuade me. Nobody could. It just feels wrong in every single.
You touch on something there. Actually, maybe that's part of her thinking as well. The idea that with this reinforced mandate, that you'd have to be very, very, very brave to bet against. You then do put the Brexit arguments to bed, and people like Clara, who feel it's going to be terrible for the country, at least then do genuinely have to sort of shut up, if you will. That's been the defining feature of the last few weeks, hasn't it? People pointing out problems, people sharing facts, people reporting news, being told to shut up, with a massive majority in the House of Commons and a manifesto pledging to pursue it whatever the costs. I think we'd probably have to shut up. It's 12:16. A special hello, I think. Thank you to everybody who said that they've piled in to listen to the programme as a result of that general election announcement. My ego is so overdeveloped, of course, that part of me is unhappy about the fact that you clearly weren't listening in the first place. Come on, people. What have you got? Jobs? Lives? Children? But a special hello to Emma Fox, who's just tweeted to say, news of the election has me and Lauren scrambling for @Mr. James OB's take on the matter from a small airport in New Zealand at midnight. Stay safe, ladies. It's 22 minutes after 12. We are discussing the general election that was never supposed to happen. Why'd you say that? Well, because 3 weeks ago, she insisted that it wouldn't. Nadeem Zahawi is the Conservative MP for Stratford-upon-Avon, sits on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, joins me on the line now. Why do you think she's changed her mind so violently, Nadeem?
I tell you what I think has happened, and I think it's been a sort of clear-headed decision. When we were going through the various debates in Parliament, Lord Hill, who was our last commissioner, who was very much a Remainer, came before my committee. I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he said, look, our interlocutors, the people we're going to be negotiating with, are watching our politics, the political system, very carefully, and any division or weakness they will exploit. So the best thing we can do, that was the question that we set him, is to come together. The country's come together already, and
I keep hearing that. What do you base? I mean, I present a radio phone-in show. I speak to people just shy of 1 million, and I haven't had any sense at all of things coming together. I'd say they were more divided than ever. Is that the new Brexit means Brexit? The country is coming together, utterly meaningless and fatuous, but electorally quite effective.
Well, look, I used to run YouGov before entering Parliament.
Yes, I know.
When you look at the business community, for example, the business community, small, medium and large, will say, look, we had the referendum, get on with it, and let's get a good deal for Britain.
Well, they don't, though, do they? They say, I wish it wasn't happening, but we're going to have to make the best of it because it looks like there's no way of stopping it. I just ask you again, Nadeem Zahabi, where do you get this idea that the country has come together?
Well, I speak to my constituents. I look at my postback. I also, as I said to you, look, the business community certainly in my area say, look, let's get on with it and get a good deal for Britain. If you believe in the democratic process, the country voted on the 23rd of June as...
yes, well, it couldn't have been more divided, could it? Apart from 1%, one direction or the other, and it would have been a 50-50 split. It's not a trick question. I really want evidence of the country coming together, apart from your postback, which we can't really look at.
Well, MPs are representative of their constituents, right? And that's how the political system works. And I remember Matteo Renzi on another radio station, not quite as good as yours, but another one, saying he was the Italian Prime Minister then. He said, look, if we don't deliver a good Brexit, then this will make the people of Europe never believe in the democratic process ever again. And so I think, look...
So just to clarify, the notion that the country's coming together, that is just the new soundbite. There's no evidence of it whatsoever.
No, not at all. There's plenty of I've just said to you, suggest to you that the polling evidence amongst business community, small, medium and large, is that the majority want us to get on and deliver a good outcome in the negotiations. And our interlocutors will look at our political system and they see division. Labour have threatened to effectively vote down the final deal.
Yes, but that's because it might not be a good outcome, Nadeem Zahawi. Surely we need an opposition to stand up and say that's not a good outcome, because I sense that many people in the Conservative Party won't be prepared to.
But not to the extent as Lord Hill, who was very much a Remainer, said, look, the time has come together because you need to negotiate with one voice. That's the best way to get a good outcome, is to be united politically and say, look, we've got to deliver the exit from the EU institutions, but a good with Europe beyond it, a settlement where businesses...
It's not as if Remainers are going to be part of the negotiating process. Negotiations will be undertaken by the government. The government is claiming that the country has come together, in which case, why do they need a general election?
Well, as you will recall, I'm sure, the Prime Minister was a reluctant Remainer.
Why was she reluctant?
Quite right. There's no one... Because I was a reluctant Remainer issue, but then when the final deal came through, that they didn't, the deal they didn't deliver to David Cameron, I decided that the right thing to do was to campaign.
But you've just told me that the Labour Party. You've just told me that the Labour Party are at fault because they want to reserve the right to reject the deal that Theresa May comes back with, and yet your entire support for Leave was based on rejecting the deal that David Cameron came back with. That seems a little hypocritical.
What I was trying to tell you, or describe to you, was that the political process here is hugely divided now. It's not...
I thought we were coming together.
Well, the country is, but not the political process. That's why... Well, Westminster. The country, I think, has come together and they want a good outcome. Politically, to do the same. The Lib Dems have been threatening through their unelected House of Lords, about 100 members of the House of Lords, that they will bring politics to a halt in our country, and they don't want this thing to happen, when they actually had a leaflet with Nick Clegg's face on it saying the best way to settle the European question is to have a referendum. The Scottish nationalists want to frustrate the process as well. That's a bad place to be in any negotiation. That's my view. I'm sure your listeners will have a view too.
Well, I'll tell you a few of them. This man is deluded. The country is no more coming together than my jeans are washing themselves. He's talking absolute nonsense. You have him on the run, keep it going. If the country is coming together, the B, Brexit means Brexit, utterly fatuous and without meaning. That's just off the top of the inbox.
Well, I'm saying to you that the polling evidence suggests that the country wants us to get a deal for Britain and to deliver...
Of course, everybody wants a good deal for Britain. Do you think it's going to be better than the deal we currently have? Are we going to end up better off than the 27 countries who remain in the EU?
I think, as I said to you, as Lord Hill said to our...
I'm asking what you think.
I agree with him. I'm about to tell you, if you give me a chance. I agree with him that if we come together, if we negotiate with one voice, with a mandate for our Prime Minister, then we will get a good deal within the EU. I think it's in their interest, as it is in ours, to have a good deal.
I'll ask you the question again. Are they going to give us a better deal than the one that their members have?
I think we will get a good deal for Britain.
Are we going to get a better deal than the one that their members have?
How can you preempt a negotiation? This is a completely naive way of negotiating.
No, I'm asking your opinion.
I've negotiated lots of business deals, not quite as big as this, but I can tell you, you don't go into negotiating by talking your position down.
No.
You go in and you say, here are the things I can do. We deliver a quarter of Europe's security and intelligence in the way we will continue to do in the future. We
could just say yes. I do think they're going to give us a better deal than the one that the remaining member states have. You could just say that, Nadeem Zahawi.
No, I think we're going to get a good deal. That's my point. If we are united, if our politics is divided, we will not get a good deal. And a vote for the Conservatives at this election will mean that we will deliver a united front to negotiate a good deal for Britain, and that's sensible. That's all I'm saying.
Many thanks for your time, Nadeem Zahawi. The MP for Stratford upon Avon. The country is coming together is the new Brexit means Brexit. The fact that it isn't will play no part whatsoever in the rhetoric and propaganda that both sides will indulge in the coming election. What about the third point of that triangle? Or indeed the fourth point of the square, the SNP? A lot of people have said to me in recent months they wish the SNP could stand politicians in England. It would rather defeat the point of their entire existence, but I understand the sentiment behind the observation. And where do the Liberal Democrats go? And if you're thinking of ringing me to tell me that the country is coming together, seriously, save yourself tuppence. I need evidence, not slogans. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to join in. We've got half an hour left until Sheila Fogarty takes over. Don't be surprised if we return to this territory tomorrow. But the notion that Theresa May has called an election because it will somehow improve the quality of the deal that we get to the European Union, that's the thing I'd love to believe. If you can help that make sense, I'll put you straight to the front of the queue. Time now is 12:30. The next caller is actually in Maastricht, appropriate enough. It's the new We Want Our Country Back, isn't it? The country is coming together. Utterly, utterly meaningless, and yet it appeals to some perfectly admirable patriotic sense. The country is coming together. The country is not coming together. Levels of hate crime are reaching unprecedented levels. People fleeing the country in their droves because their security has been taken away from them with the swing of a pen. The country is coming together. The country is not coming together. Nor should it, actually, because debate is healthy. Disagreement is the cornerstone of democracy. Turkey have just voted, admittedly in incredibly straitened circumstances, given the number of journalists that have been thrown into jail and the number of political opponents facing similar treatment. Turkey has just voted to step back from democracy. These sort of power grabs are underway across the world. The fetishization of Vladimir Putin. Thank God we live in a country where you're allowed to disagree and you're allowed to demonstrate disagreement. Here's the problem, though. Having spoken to that Conservative MP, Nadeem Zahawi, and having spoken to Margaret Beckett earlier, seems to me that a significant swathe of the country is utterly unrepresented. If you're part of that swathe, I want to know what you're going to do. 12:35 is the time. Thomas is in Maastricht, which I suppose in the context of Brexit is still for many a dirty word. Thomas, what made you pick up the phone? What would you like to say? See, the bigger the intro, the bigger the possibility that it drops off during the news. Sylvie's in Harrow. Sylvie, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hey, Sylvie.
I've just made my mind up after listening that we're going to have a snap election, and I look at it in a positive terms because I'm actually a Conservative and very, very dismayed that we're coming out of Europe. It is going to be an utter disaster. I agree with you and everybody else. Even, I was just praying that we wouldn't come out. But anyhow, I'm going to vote for Farron. So I think a lot of Mainers are going to vote for Farron simply because I want a single market. It won't be such a hard Brexit.
And you want to turn this election into a second referendum, and that leaves Jeremy Corbyn in the corner, really?
Yes. Well, I'm afraid to say, with the greatest respect, agree with you again. Don't agree on everything, but he's not a leader. He's decimated. He's got to get out. We want a healthy opposition. I cannot vote Labour because of Corbyn.
I quite like this from Kelly Cates has just tweeted, the country really is coming together. Nobody wants this election. You disagree with that. You want this election because it gives you a chance to say, please stop. The problem is that the person entrusted with enacting your wishes has, as I keep saying, I hope I'm right, I haven't misremembered this, he's got fewer MPs than I've got toes.
That's right. But I think you will find that she underestimated, and that people will go to the Lib Dems because he's decisive insofar as he wants to. He's come out straight away.
I need to go on a crash course. I need to go on a Tim Farron crash course. Actually, it's a bit of a sort of chink in the armour of my political understanding at the moment. I haven't interviewed any of the major party leaders, but Tim Farron perhaps would be the one most likely to agree to come in and have a proper chat. It's 12:37. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Sylvie there, just swimming against the tide thus far, which has seen Labour voters suggesting they might have to vote Conservative simply because of stability and competence. Maria Putney, who was indeed responsible for the very first question that Jeremy Corbyn asked David Cameron at PMQs. Remember when he canvassed questions from members of the public who could email in? Maria Putney has been listening to my programme almost longer than I've been presenting it. She was the first question, I think, out of the hat, certainly on the very first day. She remains committed to leaving, although feels unrepresented, of course, by a Labour Party that's pledged to stay. And my problem, and I can't get away from this, I'm sorry if it's a bit stuck recordy, but what if the deal is bad? Surely the only question you should be asking these politicians now is, do you really believe the European Union is going to give us a better deal than the one which its 27 remaining member states have? To which the answer is obviously no, but they're not honest enough to say that. And then you need to know what we're going to put in place that means that doesn't matter. 3 choices if you're a Brexit cheerleader. Number 1, admit your mistake and apologise. Number 2, admit that the scale of the problems is greater than you foresaw and start offering solutions. Start offering solutions. That's what we need. Clarity. Why are you talking the country down? I'm not. I'm waiting for someone to talk it up. Come and give me hope, Joanna. Come and give me optimism. Give me an upbeat analysis. Give me evidence that we're going to be fine. So admit that we're not going to get a deal that's as good as the one that the 27 remaining countries enjoy, and then show me why that doesn't matter. Don't talk to me about artisan jam. Talk to me about big, meaningful business that we will be able to do in place of the business we currently do in the single market. Because if you can't do that, then you move on to option 3, which is to blame all the problems that are going to come up in the coming years on the European Union, or, of course, on people who wished we'd never left it. There is actually a 4th option, which you probably have to take to Twitter to fully understand. The 4th option for Brexit cheerleaders is to defecate into your own hands and then start clapping furiously. There's an awful lot of that going on social media today. It's 12:39. Matthew I've got 2 Matthews, actually. We'll start with Matt in Reading. Briefly, Matt, what made you pick up the phone?
I just wanted to say this is the last chance for people who were either undecided, who didn't vote, who have changed their mind, to put a stop to hard Brexit. I'd like to see, possibly, in view of the fact that Labour is in a mess at the moment, perhaps the unthinkable, a Lib-Lab coalition.
It's not unthinkable. Gordon Brown was begging for it in 2010. It's not unthinkable at all.
He was, and it could have gone either way, but Nick Clegg went with the Tories in the end. But yeah, Lib-Lab coalition. And I think the other thing I wanted to just mention was that one of the big planks of the Brexit campaign argument was about Turkey potentially joining
there were a lot of big planks in the Brexit campaign, Matt.
That's not going to happen now.
No, of course it's not.
They've had their referendum with Erdogan. That's just not going to happen. So that's a big plank of Farage's argument down the toilet. It's not going to happen. We're not going to be.
I don't think it matters. I think you're being rational and factual. Turkey was never going to join the European Union. There was never going to be a European army as long as we had a power of veto. There was never going to be 350 million quid for the NHS. People prefer to believe the lie because the truth is complicated and often uncomfortable.
Maybe so, but I think Farage really pushed that, didn't he? Really hard. That Turkey, we're going to be overrun with 70 million Turkish Muslims going to join the EU, and we're going to be overrun here in the UK. That is not going to happen for certain now, and he can't use that again because there's just...
But it's not a referendum. It's not a referendum, no. and you know, far be it from me to malign a colleague. If we were going to pick that gentleman up on every lie he told, well, we'd never come off the radio, would we?
Yeah, but well, with malign him as much as what I can because I don't work with him. But,
lucky
anyway.
you. It's 12:41. Matt, mind how you go. Matthew's in Cardiff. Matthew, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi there. Well, I think actually this is a good decision by Theresa May to hold a snap general election. But there is a big.
Why do you think she's done it?
I think she's done it because she's an ascended Prime Minister, not a elected Prime Minister. I think that.
But that was true 3 weeks ago when she swore blind she'd never do it.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but I think that this is all about her trying to gain some sort of clear authority off the British people by actually being an elected Prime Minister. But I would really throw caution to the wind here, I have to say, and that is because with the election being held in June, lots of university students will be moving home, which means that basically that they're not going to be able to vote because they'll have changed, because they'll be going back to their place of birth as opposed or elsewhere. And then, of course, if you look at the way the electoral register is run, there's, you know, with the global financial crisis of 2008, which we don't talk about, but is still very, very most definitely affecting us today, there are a lot of people who were forced into crippling debt because of that crisis, and so have dropped off the electoral register because of the links with debt collectors and things like that that the electoral register
That's a fascinating observation. I mean, you're right as well. There's research I saw today, but of course it doesn't get the coverage that it might have done, given events at Downing Street at 11:15. 1 in 10 of us now taking out personal loans just to make ends meet, just to keep things ticking over. That number's not going to be coming down anytime soon, is it?
No, exactly, and that's one of the. And then of course, and then you haven't just got that issue. You've also got the issue where because of the state of our housing supply and stock in this country, you've got people who are continuously forced because their landlords want to put the rent up to move, which means that they never get the stability to be able to register to vote in the first place. You know, if we use the Australian system where every single person
you're on a hobby horse, Matthew. And today's not the day. I promise you that you can ride it to your heart's content on another day when we're specifically addressing the property issues. But you're right to mention it. It will, of course, perhaps play a role in the enfranchisement of the younger generation, university students or people living in rented accommodation, people who are trying to hide, if you will, from the authorities because they've got debt. I don't know how big a part it will play, but thank you for bringing it to our attention. 12:43 is the time. Jeremy is in Belsize Park. Jeremy, what would you like to say?
Well, what I'd like to say is against that, there'll be a few more younger voters coming onto the electoral roll and a few older ones who will have dropped off it. And the main point I want to say is that as a tribal Tory, I will unhesitatingly be voting Lib Dem.
Really?
And I think an awful lot of others will be. I think the divisions will be fascinating, and they won't be clear for a while, but I think there'll be quite a lot of urban against non-urban, and I think that an awful lot of people like me will forsake their party. And what we're left with afterwards will, I think it'll take time to emerge, but I think there will be new groupings. I think party loyalties will...
You've second-guessed my next question, actually. You've second-guessed what I was about to say to you, because I was about to say, do you think we might be seeing a dilution of the tribalism that you see yourself as part of? But you've kind of already said yes.
Yeah, I do. I mean, a year ago, Daniel Finkelstein said he thought the Tories could split into three parties. Yeah. It's very obvious Labour could split into two. And, you know, the Lib Dems will be a cohesive unit until they come close to power again. And that's what we need. And Labour, tragically, are a complete and utter irrelevance to this election.
Just in your own words, Jeremy, why are they a complete... Is it a one-word answer?
Well, given the opportunity, I've obviously liked more words.
No, I just go on, take as many words as you want. I just thought it might be a one-word answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, Corbyn is the biggest single reason, obviously. There'll be a few traditional Labour supporters, but the hardiest of reasonable, old-fashioned Labour supporters couldn't conceivably vote Labour in this election because there is only one issue.
And that is Brexit.
And that is Brexit.
And he hasn't provided a maypole for Remainers to dance around, has he? He just hasn't.
Nor the other side. Wherever you stand on Brexit, as a thinking Labour supporter, you can't vote for Corbyn, wherever you stand.
So we now have dyed-in-the-wool Labour supporters and tribal Tories telling us that they will be voting Liberal Democrats. What did you think about when you heard Margaret Beckett say, and in her defence, she said it was a response to the way I phrased the question, but she definitely issued the words, hold your nose and vote Labour.
Well, she's obviously she's trying to undo the enormous damage she was largely responsible for in voting for Corbyn. Yes. Her time has gone. Back to the caravan, Margaret.
Jeremy. 12:46 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I guess the Liberal Democrats have emerged as the early beneficiaries of Theresa May's decision to call an election. I would add the hard Brexiters to that list, but you're not really allowed to talk about them without being shouted down. I don't even know what it means. You really think that we're going to be better off with no deal at all, reverting immediately to World Trade Organization rules? Yes, James, because you just don't get it. You don't understand the sense of identity that is enforced by the colour of my passport. You're damn right I don't. I don't think I ever will. But to hear a Prime Minister say that Her Majesty's opposition are reserving the right to reject whatever deal her government brings back from Brussels, despite the fact that their party position is to support the withdrawal from the European Union, is pretty close to the definition of undemocratic. That, for me, was the takeaway from the top line of that speech. Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell have pledged their commitment to Brexit. But they've also said it would be nice to have a vote on the final terms of the deal, and my own parentheses now, brackets, in case it's rubbish, close brackets. But that's the binary world we seem to be creating politically at the moment on both sides of the Atlantic. Any ifs and buts, any evidence-based observations, any facts that fly in the face of the emotional narrative that's been sold to the public, well, they've never been less popular. Stephen Kinnock is the MP for Aberavon. I've done that from memory, Stephen. I hope I pronounced it correctly. And he joins me.
Not bad. 10 out of 10.
And he joins. Thank you. He joins me on the line now. You will not be surprised to learn, and you will not be prepared to take any personal responsibility for it, that a number of my correspondents this morning are despairing, and they're all Labour supporters because they don't feel they can support Labour, and there's a general election around the corner.
Well, I'm not going to pretend that we're in a great place nationally in terms of the opinion polls, but one thing I would say, James, is, since I got elected 2 years ago, I've been so impressed with the colleagues that I've met. They do a fantastic job standing up for their constituency, campaigning for their community, really being a strong voice in Westminster. And I think we've got to get out on the doorsteps now and remind people of whatever is happening at a national level. Labour MPs are their best chance of holding this government to account, avoiding the extreme Brexit that so many of the people around Theresa May are pushing her towards, and also pointing out that this is an incredibly opportunistic move where once again we see a Conservative Prime Minister putting party before country.
Why do you think she's done it then? A little more detail on that allegation of opportunism.
I think that she is being run now by a cabal of Brextremists who are around her pushing for the UK to crash out of the EU on WTO terms, and for the this sort of annoying thing called democracy, where we have an opposition that actually holds the government to account. They don't really want any of that, and they want to just steamroller their vision of a harsh Brexit through Parliament. So I think she's seen an opportunity. Of course, we're not in a good place nationally, and she's jumped on that opportunity for narrow party political gain. I mean, the country needs stability. It needs continuity. There's already turbulence in the markets, turbulence in terms of investors. Where are we going with Brexit? Huge number of question marks about the future of the UK, with Scotland and Northern Ireland potentially breaking away. And instead of getting focused on that, she is playing narrow party political games.
Why do you think so many people who, if your analysis of Brexit is correct, are going to be at the front of the queue for pain and punishment, have been persuaded that this path may be to their benefit?
Well, I think if you look at the referendum campaign, it ended up being a howl of pain. We've seen communities all across the country who have not seen their wages rise at all since 2007. We've got a situation where London and the South East have done pretty well since the crash in 2007, but the rest of the country has been really badly left behind. And I think that the referendum vote became an opportunity to give politics a kick, and that's what happened, and that's perfectly understandable. The problem is that the EU was not the cause of any of these troubles. The cause has been years and years of failing political leadership in this country, and I hope on the 8th of June people will actually see where the blame lies, and they will go to the ballot box and say, well, we actually need a change in direction. We need a new way of running the country. The EU was used as the fall guy.
But the Labour Party policy is to press ahead with leaving.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've had
There's
the
two
referendum.
Labour parties, isn't there, Stephen Kinnock? There's the one Jeremy Corbyn leads, and there's the one you're a member of.
Well, on Brexit, I mean, I actually voted for the triggering of Article 50, and that's because the referendum turned the normal conduct of politics on its head. And I feel that there are millions of people who voted Remain who actually feel that we've got to now get on with the job. So I think that, you know, we've got to, it's kind of making the best of a bad job, really, and there's a large part of...
It's not much of a slogan.
Well, I mean, on Brexit, I mean, and Keir Starmer has set out the 6 tests for what we believe Brexit should look like, and I think that that's where the country is actually on this issue. In terms of where we are nationally and, you know, the real challenges we've had around the leadership of the party, we've just got to get out there on the doorstep and remind people that we, as local campaigning community constituency MPs, and if you look at, you know, the steel industry, my constituency of Aberavon, huge challenges there. We've managed to turn it around thanks to Labour MPs and the trade union movement rallying around and putting huge pressure on the government, pointing out the massive failures of this government to stand up for people like the steel workers in my constituency.
Okay.
So let's get that local agenda moving forward, and I think we've got a good chance for the 8th of June.
Final question, actually call it a test. 1903, 1924, 1929, 1977. What happened in those years?
Well,
it's a complete booby trap. I mean, it was a lib-lab pact. Do you think there'll be another one?
I'd rather think of 1945. I think that our country is facing, although of course, you know, you can't compare the huge turmoil we went through in the Second World War in terms of the turmoil of our politics right now, and our country is more divided than it's ever been, certainly in my lifetime, I think. Let's look at this as an opportunity to say, look, we need a strong opposition in this country. We've got a government that wants to steamroller its vision of Brexit through chilling words on the steps of Downing Street today, where Theresa May said, I want a united Westminster. Well, hold on a second. I thought the point of democracy was having an opposition that holds the government to account. She wants to turn our country into a European version of the Cayman Islands, and I don't think the people of Britain will stand for that.
Well, we shall see. 12:58 is the time. Stephen Kinnock, many thanks indeed. You have been listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I have a sneaking suspicion that Sheila Fogarty will be continuing this line of conversations throughout the afternoon. Ian Dale, of course, due to join you at 4 o'clock. And seriously, if you are thinking of having a flutter, put a few quid on me returning to it again come 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. There is a general election on the way. It will be on June the 8th. The country is apparently coming together, although evidence of that thus far is confined to the contents of Nadeem Zahawi's post bag. That's the best I've managed to muster in the course of just under 2 hours discussing the issue.